My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 36 years old. And this is the story of how I was humiliated in front of the people I once called family, only to rise with a power they never saw coming. It happened on what was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life. Colin and I had been engaged for 3 months. We met 6 years ago at a conference in Savannah. He was leading a seminar on digital branding, and I was there representing a boutique interior design firm I'd built from scratch. I'd worked my way up from painting walls in rental units to rebranding entire commercial properties. I thought I'd found a partner who respected the same grind. Someone who loved me for the woman I was, driven, loyal, independent. That illusion shattered in a single evening. Colin's mother, Margaret Anderson, had always been distant with me. Polite in a way that felt like a mask. Every time we spoke, it was as if I was auditioning for a role I was never going to get. Still, I told myself she was just traditional. Set in her ways. Not cruel. Just cautious. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, even when she asked once if I planned on keeping my own last name like some modern divorcee. The night of the engagement dinner, I wore a deep emerald dress, the same shade Colin once told me reminded him of the ocean in Maui, where he said he wanted to take me for our honeymoon. I'd spent the afternoon helping the caterers at the Anderson estate in Mount Pleasant. Not because I had to, but because I wanted everything to be perfect. Margaret arrived late. Not fashionably. Not apologetically. Just late. She stepped in wearing a pearl-colored pantsuit, sharp as a blade, and took one look at me before muttering to her sister, "I thought we agreed this would be formal, not flashy." I let it go. I was used to that kind of jab by now. But it was what happened after dinner that still plays in my mind like a scene I'll never erase. Colin stood to make a toast. Everyone raised their glasses. Then, from across the table, Margaret said in a cold, flat voice, "Before we toast, there's something I need to ask Olivia." I froze. She stood, reached into her purse, and pulled out a small velvet box. My ring box. She opened it, revealing the diamond ring Colin had given me the night he proposed. Only it wasn't sparkling. It was resting there, like a verdict. "I had the stone appraised," she said coolly. "Do you know how embarrassing it is for our family to present a synthetic diamond to our friends? Do you think this is a game?" My heart stopped. I looked at Colin. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even blink. Margaret walked over to me, leaned forward, and held the ring between 2 fingers. Then, in front of everyone, my parents, his cousins, my friends, she let it drop onto my dinner plate with a dull clink. "This is not a marriage," she said. "This is a transaction. And my son deserves someone who brings more to the table." Colin stayed silent. Not a word. Not a breath. As if he'd already decided which side of the war he was standing on, and it wasn't mine. I stood. Every cell in my body was burning. But my face didn't show it. I picked up the ring, wiped it on the cloth napkin, and placed it gently into my purse. Then I turned to Margaret, met her icy stare, and said, "You're absolutely right." The room stilled. "I do believe your son deserves someone who brings more to the table." Unfortunately, I brought myself. And then, without shedding a single tear, I walked out of the Anderson estate and into the night, never looking back. What they didn't know that evening, what Colin never bothered to remember, was that the very house they were dining in, the elegant white-columned estate, it was a leased property. Not owned. Managed by a local firm I'd once consulted for when it was going bankrupt. And the commercial complex where Margaret owned her prized bridal boutique? It had just gone into foreclosure, and was quietly listed on a private acquisition site 2 days prior. I opened my phone in the back of my Uber, heart still racing, and called my lawyer. "Gerald," I said calmly, "I want you to buy the Willow Heights building. All of it. Full cash offer. No disclosures. Make it clean." He hesitated for a beat. That's Margaret Anderson's shop address, isn't it? I didn't answer directly. I didn't have to. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the seat. It was time. Time they learned who I really was. Not just a woman with a pretty ring. A woman with leverage. The following morning, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, a cup of black coffee untouched beside me. Outside, Charleston was waking up slowly, shops opening, dog walkers strolling past, the city humming like nothing had happened. But something had. And I wasn't the same woman who walked into that dinner. I'm Olivia Carter. And I've spent the last 15 years building not just a business, but a network of influence Margaret Anderson wouldn't even know how to spell. After I walked out of the engagement dinner, I didn't cry. Not once. Not even when my mother called later that night, worried and furious, asking me why I didn't slap that woman or call Colin out in front of everyone. But what good would that have done? A scene might satisfy someone for a night, but power satisfies you for life. Colin texted the next day. A single line. Sorry about last night. My mom just gets emotional. That's all. Not I love you. Not I defended you. Not what she did was wrong. Just a pathetic shrug of a message, like I'd spilled coffee on her rug instead of being humiliated at my own engagement dinner. I left him on read. Let the silence sting the way his indifference had stung me. I opened my laptop and reviewed the commercial property files Gerald had sent me overnight. The Willow Heights building was indeed on the market, due to unpaid taxes, code violations, and several missed mortgage payments by the previous owner. The retail spaces inside, including Margaret's boutique, were all tenants at will. Meaning, no long-term lease. No tenant protections. And rent was grossly under market value. Margaret had gotten lucky when the last owners were desperate to fill spaces. That luck had just expired. I scheduled a walkthrough under an alias. I knew the leasing agent, Rebecca Gaines, who'd once hired me to redesign a row of offices in downtown Charleston after her divorce. She owed me a favor. When I called, she answered on the second ring. Olivia. I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry. Her voice was warm, but tinged with curiosity. Word traveled fast. I didn't indulge her gossip cravings. I need access to Willow Heights before noon. And I need it quiet. Can you do that for me? A pause. Then a chuckle. Oh, honey. You're about to do something savage, aren't you? I smiled. That depends on who's watching. By 11:45 a.m., I was in the building. The hallways smelled faintly of lavender and aging drywall. The elevator creaked. It was a property with good bones, just mismanaged. Like so many things in life. Margaret's boutique, Maison Blanche, sat on the corner unit with the most glass frontage. Whitewashed brick, chandeliers, and gold cursive signage that read Elegance Redefined. I stood across from it, watching a bride-to-be walk out with a dress bag over her shoulder, beaming. I wasn't here to destroy beauty. I was here to reclaim something no one saw but me, the power of being underestimated. 3 days later, I signed the papers. Wire transfer, cleared. Ownership, transferred. Tenants, notified. All from behind the scenes. No fanfare. No warning. The first official action I took as the new landlord? An anonymous letter, delivered by courier to each business in the building, outlining new rent policies based on current market rates. Most shops saw a 5 to 10% increase, standard, manageable. But not Margaret's. Hers had been underpaying for nearly 8 years. My letter advised of an immediate 65% increase, reflecting the building's newly assessed value and location demand. She had 30 days to comply. Or vacate. A week passed before I received the email from Margaret's personal assistant, begging to negotiate. I declined. Politely, of course. Meanwhile, Colin's messages grew more erratic. We need to talk. I think we should take a break from all the drama. This doesn't have to be ugly. The nerve. He was the kind of man who could watch someone bleed and ask why they were making such a mess. The irony was, he thought silence meant surrender. But mine was a strategy. One built on every lesson I'd learned watching men like him win because women like me were taught to be gracious. The next time I saw Colin was 2 weeks later, by accident. Or maybe fate. Charleston was a small town when it wanted to be. I was meeting a new client at a rooftop bar near King Street. We'd just finished signing a contract for the renovation of a coastal resort lobby when I caught a glimpse of him, Colin, leaning against the balcony with a woman draped over his arm. Younger. Blonde. Giggling at something dumb he was saying. He looked thinner, his hair more styled than usual. It hit me all at once, he wasn't just moving on. He'd already started the process long before Margaret threw my ring. Maybe the boutique incident wasn't a humiliation, it was an extraction. A way to shove me out without blood on their hands. I turned my head before he could see me, signed the check, and walked out. But later that night, after a long shower and a glass of Cabernet, I drafted an email to my attorney. Eliminate at will. Draft formal lease terms for all Willow tenants. Month to month. All under my name. Send notices by Monday. I didn't want just ownership. I wanted full control. And Margaret? She had no idea her future was now tied to a lease signed by the woman she'd tried to break in front of her entire family. The letters went out on a Monday morning, just before sunrise. I watched the sky shift from gray to rose through the large windows of my apartment, sipping coffee as the final confirmations from my attorney hit my inbox. Each email subject line contained the same phrase, lease notification, Willow Heights. Margaret's copy was hand-delivered. I had instructed Gerald's office to send a courier rather than rely on regular mail. I wanted her to feel it land. No signature required, just enough weight to make her pause and wonder why the envelope was so thick. Inside was a new lease agreement with my name printed boldly on the letterhead, complete with revised rent terms and a clause noting the termination of the month-to-month verbal agreement that had protected her for years. By 10:15 a.m., my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I picked up. Hello? A brittle, clipped voice shot through the receiver. This is Margaret Anderson. I don't know what kind of joke you think this is, but I just received your notice. I walked slowly toward my window, watching the busy Charleston streets below. Good morning, Margaret, I said evenly. Not a joke. Business. You have no right. I have every legal right. As of last week, I'm the registered owner of the Willow Heights property, which includes the unit Maison Blanche occupies. There was a stunned silence. I could hear the sharp inhale on the other end of the line. You have bought it? Her voice cracked. I did, I said. You may want to speak to your financial advisor. Or your son. Whoever handles your overhead. The new rate reflects the updated valuation. I trust you'll find it fair, considering the area's demand. You did this because of that dinner. Her voice turned venomous now. Because I told the truth. No, Margaret. You did this, I said quietly. When you humiliated me in front of my family, friends, and fiancé, and he stood by in silence, you showed me exactly who you are. I simply responded like someone who no longer has anything to lose. There was a faint shuffle, and then she laughed, sharp and bitter. You'll regret this, Olivia. Do you think people won't find out? That the community will just let you bully an established business out of a property she helped build? Oh, I think they'll be very interested, I replied. Especially when they find out you've been underpaying rent by nearly 65% for years. And that the previous owners were too scared of your last name to make changes. But I'm not. You wanted power at that dinner, Margaret. Now you've got it, just not the kind you can control. I hung up before she could reply. I didn't slam the phone. I didn't scream. I simply placed it back on the counter, then turned to my laptop and opened my appointment calendar. I had a meeting to prepare for. Power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears a blazer, signs documents at dawn, and moves in silence. By Friday, the calls had started coming in. Other tenants in the Willow Heights building had reviewed their leases. Most of them had no problem with the minor increases. A few even thanked me for promising to renovate the lobby and update the parking lot lighting. But Margaret? Margaret had no intention of signing. Instead, she tried something else. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Colin. I heard you bought Willow. You're really going to ruin her business over a ring? I stared at the screen. The entitlement. The complete lack of self-awareness. The idea that somehow, I was the villain, for defending myself, for refusing to play the role of the grateful fiancé who just swallowed humiliation like a cocktail. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Gerald and replied, use this in case of public backlash. Let them see he defended theft, but not his partner. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? Theft. Margaret may have thrown the ring, but Colin was the one who quietly erased our plans. Who stood by as his mother dismantled our relationship in public. Who, when I left, chose not to follow. I wasn't finished. I hired a small but sharp PR firm I'd worked with during a resort rebrand in Hilton Head. Their specialty? Strategic image management. Let's get ahead of the narrative, I told them. I'm a businesswoman who purchased a neglected commercial property. I'm renovating it. Increasing value. If anyone asks about the bridal boutique, be honest. It was a sweetheart lease, now corrected. No bad blood. No vendetta. Just math. The lead strategist, Tanya, leaned back in her chair with a grin. You don't want to crush her publicly. You want to let her dig her own grave. Exactly. And dig, she did. Margaret took to Facebook, not from her own account, of course. But through a post written by a mutual acquaintance, claiming Olivia Carter had destroyed a beloved local business out of spite. That she'd always been obsessed with control, and was now using her money to punish the Anderson family for ending the engagement. Tanya flagged it before I even saw it. Within hours, we'd issued a quiet statement to local media, confirming the sale, the rent updates, and our intention to preserve the historical character of the building while modernizing its management. The comments rolled in. Honestly, the Anderson boutique has been outdated for years. Isn't this the same Margaret who threw a ring at someone during a dinner party? Good. About time someone bought that place and fixed it up. People didn't rally behind Margaret. They didn't know her. But they knew women like her. Women who clawed their way into elite social circles and never let anyone forget it. Women who smiled through lipstick but dripped with contempt underneath. I didn't need to destroy her. I just needed to outlast her. When her assistant called again, this time, panicked, I knew the walls were closing in. She says she can't afford the new rent, the assistant stammered. She's asking if there's any way to reduce the increase. Maybe split the difference? I paused, letting the silence do its work. Let her know the lease offer is valid until Friday at 5 p.m. After that, the unit will be shown to interested parties. I already have 3 inquiries. She's going to be furious. No, I said. She's going to be unemployed. And I meant it. Because I wasn't just her former almost daughter-in-law anymore. I was her landlord. Friday at 5 p.m. came and went. No signed lease. No counteroffer. Just silence. The next morning, I instructed Rebecca, the property manager, to list Margaret's unit as available. Within 48 hours, I had 4 serious inquiries. 2 from national chains looking to expand their bridal footprint in Charleston, and 1 from a boutique run by a woman I'd mentored 3 years ago. Her name was Kira Stone, and I remembered her clearly, tenacious, talented, and overlooked by Margaret herself during a local businesswomen's luncheon. The irony made me smile. "Kira," I said when we met over coffee, "how would you like the corner unit at Willow Heights? Rent will be market standard, but I'll throw in a renovation budget if you sign for 2 years." Her eyes widened. "Wait, that's where Maison Blanche is, right? I thought that was permanent." "Nothing's permanent," I said. "Not when the paperwork isn't signed." We shook hands 2 days later. And that's when Margaret snapped. I was at my office, working on a coastal commercial redesign, when security buzzed. "There's a Margaret Anderson here to see you," my receptionist said, her voice tight. She didn't have an appointment. I stared at the phone for a second. "Send her up," I said calmly. I wanted to see her eyes when she realized that this time, she wasn't in control. She stormed into my office like a hurricane in pearls, hair perfect, lipstick sharp, fury painted across her face. "You arrogant little girl," she hissed. "You think money gives you the right to do this to my family?" "No," I replied, standing slowly. "But a legal deed, a notarized title transfer, and a defaulted lease agreement do." She slammed her palm on my desk. "I built that business from scratch." "Then you should have protected it better," I said coldly. Her voice cracked, the anger giving way to something else, something far more desperate. "Colin, he's devastated. He said you haven't returned a single call. That you're trying to ruin him." I met her eyes, calm and level. "I didn't ruin Colin. Colin did that to himself when he stayed silent while his mother disrespected the woman he claimed to love. He made his choice." Margaret blinked rapidly, as if seeing me for the first time. "You think you're better than us?" "No," I said, walking to the window and pointing toward the city skyline. "I just learned that some people don't deserve to sit at your table, even if you've said it for them for years." "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "I doubt it." She turned and walked out. And just like that, the Anderson empire, propped up by image and entitlement, started to crumble. Colin finally got the hint. 1 week later, a formal email arrived through Gerald's office. "Consider this the official termination of the engagement between Colin Anderson and Olivia Carter." No apology. No admission. Just a signature and a timestamp. How poetic. I printed it out and slid it into a folder labeled "Proof He Was Never Ready." Then, just as I was settling into a strange new calm, something unexpected happened. Colin sued me. Yes, he actually filed a civil suit claiming emotional damages from the property deal, arguing that I purchased Willow Heights solely to cause intentional harm to his family's reputation. I laughed out loud when Gerald read it aloud to me. He was already drafting the counterclaim. "This is exactly the kind of suit judges throw out with prejudice," he said. "He doesn't have a lease, doesn't have equity, and doesn't even have a ring to return. He's just trying to get attention," I muttered. "Or hoping you'll settle." "Oh, he's not getting a dime. He can't even pay for his own lawyer. I guarantee his mother is footing the bill." I filed a formal countersuit, not for money, but to expose the timeline. I included every financial document I'd collected during our engagement. Every invoice he ran through our shared card for his trips with other women. And yes, Gerald helped me file a separate report for fraud. Colin had attempted to transfer money from our joint savings account without consent 3 weeks before the engagement ended. Not a lot, but enough to prove intent. By the time the court hearing came, Colin's face was no longer smug. It was tired. Sullen. That golden boy shine had worn off. He didn't even make eye contact with me when I walked into the courtroom. I wore a gray suit, hair back, no makeup beyond a swipe of lipstick. Professional. Unbothered. The judge read through the documents in silence. You're alleging that Ms. Carter's purchase of a publicly available building was an act of targeted revenge, the judge asked. Colin's lawyer stammered, "Yes, Your Honor, we believe it was malicious in nature." "Do you have proof of coercion? Fraud? Blackmail?" "Not exactly, but..." "Then I suggest you withdraw this baseless claim before I penalize your client for wasting the court's time." The case was dismissed in less than 20 minutes. Colin didn't even stay for the judge's closing remarks. That night, for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a drink. Not out of celebration, but closure. He had nothing left to take from me. And what I'd reclaimed was everything. After the court dismissed Colin's lawsuit, the silence that followed was unlike anything I had experienced before. It wasn't peace, not yet. It was the eerie quiet of a storm that had finally passed. The kind that leaves wreckage in its wake, but also clears a path. I didn't celebrate. Not publicly. No smug posts, no cryptic Instagram captions. Just the simple satisfaction of knowing the law had done what love could not, protect me. But the world wasn't done with Colin yet. 2 weeks after the hearing, I received an email from a woman named Vanessa Green. Subject line, "Can we speak privately?" She was a junior associate at a firm Colin had briefly consulted with after one of his startup failures. Her message was short, but devastating. "Ms. Carter, I debated for days before writing this. I believe you should know that Colin approached me 2 years ago asking if I'd help him secure funding using your business credit line. I declined and reported it to my supervisor, who dismissed it as a misunderstanding. I now realize he was grooming me to be a fallback. I'm deeply sorry." My hands trembled as I read the message again. 2 years ago. While we were planning our future. While I was folding his socks and updating our savings spreadsheet. I didn't reply right away. I sat with it for a while. Let the ache settle. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I drove. Out of the city. Past the harbor. All the way to a quiet strip of land my mother once took me to as a child, the same place she went after her own divorce. There, sitting in my car under a blanket of stars, I cried. Not because I missed Colin. Not because I wanted him back. But because for the first time, I let myself grieve what I thought we were. The illusion. The wasted years. The version of him that never existed. When I returned to Charleston the next morning, my mind was clear. The anger had crystallized into resolve. Not for revenge. That part was done. Now. I wanted legacy. That night, I reopened an old folder on my computer, one I hadn't touched since before Colin. It was a dream I'd shelved in favor of compromise, the thing they tell women to do when they fall in love with men who fear their ambition. It was titled, Fiscally Hers, a Financial Empowerment Studio. My original idea had been to open a boutique accounting and coaching firm specifically for women, divorced, widowed, underserved, underestimated, women who were told they weren't good with money and then punished for believing it. I had pitched it to Colin once years ago. He laughed and said, "Women don't need another safe space, they need to toughen up." I had believed him. That was my real mistake. So I picked up the phone and called Caitlin Morales, my contact at Redmond Trust, the same bank where I'd protected my inheritance. Her voice lit up the moment she heard mine. "Olivia. I've been hoping you'd call. I want to open an office," I told her. Downtown Charleston. Modest. Accessible. But I want it mine. Full ownership. She didn't hesitate. "We'll make it happen." Within 3 weeks, I signed a lease in a historic row building off Queen Street, a space with sunlight, high ceilings, and hardwood floors that still creaked when you walked. I furnished it minimally. A few plants, shelves of ledgers and books, a strong Wi-Fi signal, and a kettle for tea. No pomp. No pretense. Just a place where women could sit down and take control of what was theirs. The first client I welcomed through the door was a woman named Joanne Matthews. Recently divorced. 2 children. Her ex-husband had drained their savings and maxed out her credit cards without her knowledge. She sat across from me, hands shaking, terrified of even logging into her own accounts. By the end of our 3rd session, she'd created a new savings structure, eliminated 40% of her high-interest debt, and enrolled in a business course she'd abandoned 15 years ago. She cried when she told me she hadn't felt this safe in years. I walked her to the door, hugged her, and then sat back at my desk and stared out the window. This was my new revenge. Not against Colin. Not against Margaret. Against a system that teaches women to shrink themselves in love. And then punishes them for doing it. Every week, the office grew busier. Women brought their sisters, their friends, their coworkers. I taught them how to read contracts, how to set up trusts, how to audit their own relationships. One even brought in her 22-year-old daughter who wanted to learn how to invest in her first property. Colin called twice more. Once from an unknown number. Once from a blocked one. I never picked up. Margaret eventually vacated the Willow Heights unit. Kira's boutique took its place. Fresh paint, curated gowns from local designers, champagne served in cut crystal. She hosted an opening night gala and asked me to attend. I walked in wearing a black suit and red heels. Margaret's old staff, 3 of whom Kira hired, watched me with quiet awe. One of them whispered, "I wish she could see this." I smiled. She does. She just never thought she'd be on the outside looking in. When I left that night, I passed by the old Maison Blanche sign, now removed and replaced with gold letters that read, "Stone and Silk." And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like the woman who'd been thrown away. I felt like the woman who built something better. The seasons shifted. Spring slid quietly into summer, and with it came a warmth that didn't just settle into the city but into my life. My new office, fiscally hers, had grown from a quiet idea into a humming, living thing. Word had spread, women from all over Charleston were walking through that glass door, not for handouts, but for clarity, for confidence. Divorcees, single mothers, small business owners, young professionals, even retirees. Some came with shame in their voices. Others came with fire in their eyes. And all of them left a little taller. Meanwhile, Margaret Anderson was nowhere to be seen. Her boutique had closed quietly, no announcement, no farewell sale, just darkened windows and silence. Kira's shop, Stone and Silk, was flourishing in its place. She'd even launched a local wedding blog highlighting women-owned vendors and sustainable fashion. I'd become something I never thought I'd be, content. But as life would have it, Colin wasn't done with me yet. It started with a call from a reporter at the Post and Courier. She said she was working on a piece about rising small businesses in Charleston and wanted to feature my firm. I nearly agreed until she asked one odd question. "Would you like to comment on the federal investigation into Colin Anderson's tax filings?" I froze. "I'm sorry, what?" She hesitated. "You didn't hear?" I hadn't. Colin had been under review for over a year, it turned out. It started with discrepancies in one of his failed startups, the same one he had used to justify taking out a second mortgage on his old condo without disclosing it. There were whispers of improper use of investor funds, misrepresentation, and worst of all, offshore activity involving shell accounts in Belize. My stomach turned. I had suspected he was reckless. I didn't know he was criminal. The next day, I received a formal letter from the IRS. I wasn't under investigation, thank God, but I was listed as a former financial cosigner on a business card from 3 years prior. They wanted a statement. Proof that I had no involvement in any of his recent filings. I had everything, of course. Gerald helped me draft a bulletproof response within 48 hours. But it lit something inside me again. Not rage. Not even resentment. Just disbelief. That someone could fall so far and still act as if the fall was someone else's fault. Then came the email. From Natalie Carter. Yes, that Natalie. The woman Colin had started seeing while we were still engaged. The same woman who had messaged me months ago, demanding I have compassion. This time, her message was different. Olivia. I don't expect you to reply. I'm writing because I don't know who else to turn to. Colin was arrested yesterday. They took him from his apartment in front of me. I didn't even know half of what he was doing. He lied to me. He said you ruined him. He said you poisoned people against him. But now I know he was lying to both of us. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For a moment, I stared at the message, uncertain of what I was feeling. Not satisfaction. Not schadenfreude. Just closure. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I forwarded the email to Gerald and then deleted it. The next day, I received confirmation from the Department of Justice. Colin was being charged with federal tax fraud, wire fraud, and investor deception across 3 separate counts. His bail had been denied pending further investigation. It was estimated he'd misappropriated over $400,000 in client and investor funds over 5 years. He was looking at a potential sentence of 15 years. The man who once mocked me for over-planning and calculating everything had been undone by his own inability to count the cost of his deceit. And while he sat in a federal holding cell, I was being honored at a local women's finance gala for founding one of the most impactful financial mentorship programs in the Lowcountry. The contrast was poetic. After the ceremony, I stood outside the venue, letting the night air cool my skin, and looked out over the Charleston waterfront. The city lights glimmered like scattered stars on the water. My phone buzzed. A message from an old friend. One I hadn't spoken to in years. Saw the article about Fiscally Hers. You're building something incredible. Proud of you. I smiled. And for the first time since all of this began, I allowed myself a real breath. The kind you take when you know that you've not only survived, but rebuilt. But there was still one piece left. Something I'd been holding on to quietly. 2 years ago, just before Aunt Clara passed, she wrote me a letter. Not the one the bank gave me. A different one. I'd never opened it. Not out of fear. But out of timing. I wasn't ready then. Now I was. I sat down at my desk that night, candle lit, a glass of wine in hand, and carefully opened the envelope. Her handwriting danced across the page in violet ink. My dearest Olivia. If you're reading this, something has ended. And that's okay. Endings are not failures, they're redirections. You are the sum of every woman who came before you. Strong. Smart. Steady. Never forget that you don't need anyone's approval to become who you're meant to be. Use what I left you to build, not to hide. And when you're ready, do one thing for me, buy something that makes the world just a little more fair. All my love, Clara. I wiped away a single tear and whispered, I will. And the next morning, I began researching nonprofit grants. Because revenge had brought me justice. But legacy? That would bring me peace. 3 months passed. Charleston's summer heat mellowed into a softer fall warmth. The air smelled of river water and jasmine again, and I had never felt more grounded in my own life. The papers officially came through on a Tuesday morning. Colin Anderson had accepted a plea deal. 10 years in federal prison, no eligibility for parole for 6. Restitution owed to investors, to former clients, and to the state. No appeal. I read the headlines in silence. I didn't smile. I didn't weep. I simply set the newspaper down, made myself a cup of mint tea, and went to work. Because while the world was finally catching up with Colin, I had already moved far beyond him. That same week, I finalized the acquisition of a smaller building just outside of Charleston's historic district. It had once been a beauty school, abandoned since the pandemic, but the bones were good, and the location perfect. I named it Clara House. Not for me. For every woman who ever needed a place to start over. For every Olivia who needed to feel safe enough to ask, how do I rebuild? The vision was simple: a free financial literacy and legal clinic for women in crisis. Divorce. Debt. Abuse. Fear. We'd help them stabilize, educate, and rise. I partnered with 2 attorneys, 1 trauma-informed therapist, and a group of retired accountants, most of them women who had spent decades in industries where no one listened to them. Now, they'd help others speak. The launch event was modest, just how I wanted it. No ribbon-cutting ceremony, no mayor's photo op. Just women, seated at round tables, opening their folders and finding something they'd lost long ago: clarity. It was around that time I received a letter. Not from Colin. From Margaret. The envelope was plain, the handwriting formal and sharp. Olivia. I'm sure I'm the last person you want to hear from. And I don't expect a response. But I felt compelled to say something after reading about Clara House in the papers. I want you to know. I was wrong. About you. About what strength looks like. About what my son needed. You were never trying to take something from us. You were trying to give him a life with integrity. I couldn't see that then. And now, the consequences are in front of us all. I lost my business. My reputation. And now, my son. But I'm grateful, in some strange way, that he was engaged to you. Because maybe that experience taught him something no sentence ever could. I hope you find peace. And more than that, I hope you keep helping others find it too. Margaret. I folded the letter and placed it into the same file as the court documents, the lease agreements, the messages from Colin's mistress. Not as a trophy. But as a record. The truth, preserved. I never responded. Some things are better left unsaid. 2 weeks later, a woman named Teresa came to Clara House. Late 30s. Shaky voice. She'd spent 11 years married to a man who controlled every dollar she earned as a freelance artist. She'd never had her own bank account. Never paid a bill herself. She thought she was stupid. Within an hour, we showed her just how intelligent she truly was. We mapped her spending, projected a simple monthly budget, and referred her to a grant program for women entrepreneurs. She cried when she realized she could file for separation without fear of losing her studio. And that night, as I turned off the lights and locked up, I stood at the door of Clara House and whispered, "Thank you, Aunt Clara." Because I finally understood. She didn't just leave me money. She left me a mission. Later that week, I was invited to speak at a businesswomen's conference. The theme was reclaiming power after loss. I took the stage wearing a navy blazer and flats. No designer labels. No diamonds. Just a microphone and a truth that couldn't be taken anymore. I told the room. Power isn't what someone hands you. It's what you build quietly, day by day, while the world tells you you're being too much or not enough. My ex-fiancé's mother once threw my engagement ring in front of a table full of people and told me I didn't belong at their table. So I built my own. And now, women come to that table every week to learn how to never be at someone's mercy again. The room went silent. Then someone stood. Then another. And another. Until the whole hall was clapping, not because I was special, but because I had spoken what so many women had lived through in silence. After the event, a young girl in her 20s came up to me with tears in her eyes. "Your story, it made me realize I don't have to marry the guy who keeps telling me I'm lucky to have him." I smiled gently and said, "You're not lucky to be chosen. You're powerful for choosing yourself." That night, I walked back to my apartment, the same one Colin once said looked too independent. It still had the cream sheets I loved, the tea cabinet he mocked, and the silence that now wrapped around me like a favorite coat. Not empty. Not lonely. Just mine. In the end, Colin's downfall wasn't caused by me. It was caused by every corner he cut, every lie he told, every woman he underestimated. He thought betrayal would break me. But what he didn't realize was, I don't break. I rebuild. And this time, I didn't just get even. I got everything. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with reclaiming the dignity someone tried to strip away. Olivia didn't just survive betrayal, she built something from it. Something lasting. Something that lifted others. If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or used, remember, you're allowed to fight back with grace, with strategy, and with power. Let us know in the comments what part of Olivia's journey hit you hardest. And don't forget to follow Revenge Echoes for more real stories of justice, strength, and unapologetic comebacks.